Hey everybody, what's going on? My name is David and welcome to the COVID Killer series. This series of videos are meant to introduce you to a few new hobbies you can pick up while we're on quarantine and forced to stay home until things get a little bit better. Don't forget to wear a mask. You can also hopefully use some of these hobbies in the future when you're looking for something to do and you have too much free time on your hands. I know I definitely would. So you never know what you're capable of, don't be afraid to try something new. So here we go. Hi everyone, I'm going to be showing you a quick and short tutorial on some of the basic editing skills in Adobe Photoshop. I'm just basically going to take you through the basic adjustments that they have here. Once you have Photoshop open, you can see you have the different adjustments on the right over here. If you don't know how to import an image, that comes up on this main screen here. All you have to do is you can go to File, and you should be able to go down to Import, and then you can choose an image. You'll probably want to choose from your device, and then it'll just tell you where it'll come from. Mine's coming from my memory card and my camera, so that's why it says that. But we're just going to kind of ignore that for now. So like I said, once you get your picture here, this is actually a picture I took earlier today. These are just some flowers that I had on my back table. Even when you're taking photos, just feel free to look around and see what interests you. You know, there's a lot that you can just take just from being outside or around the house. You know, just try to find something that's interesting. You also might want to explore with different angles. So I actually have another photo up here where I sat underneath the table and I took kind of like a below shot looking up at one of the flowers here. So yeah, always try to experiment, get some different angles in there. Play around, take as many shots as you want. There's nothing wrong with taking too many pictures. So like I said, I kind of just want to take you through the basic adjustments that we have here. Photoshop is really great. It has a lot of different functions that you could use. But typically what I do is I try not to go too crazy and I just like to do the basic adjustments over here. So you have brightness and contrast, you have your different levels, you have curves, you have your exposure, you have vibrance, hue saturation, color balance, black and white, photo filter, channel mixer, color lookup, gradient map, selective color, thresholds, posterize, and invert. If you don't remember all those, it's okay. I'm probably not going to take you through all of them. But just to give you an idea, like once you open up Photoshop, the adjustments will come up right over here. I also have the latest version. I have 2020. So if you don't have the latest version, this might look a little bit different, but they typically all look the same depending on what year the software is. So something that I usually like to do first is you want to look at your picture and just kind of get a feel for where the light is coming from. So I mostly have light coming from this side and from behind these purple flowers here. That's something also to keep in mind when you are taking photos. You want to keep in mind where the light is coming from because that's really going to depict how your image comes out, especially when you're looking at it in Photoshop. So brightness and contrast is one of the first things I would say you should probably look at. And then it'll come up with this menu here where you can kind of drag and drop. Something else I want you to notice is that it brings up a layer. So Photoshop creates these layers automatically that kind of get placed on top of one another. So you'll always have this background layer, which is kind of your base to the image. And then anytime you click on an adjustment or any other function, you're going to have another layer that it automatically creates. All right, so just remember that all these layers are kind of put on one another. And there is a way to blend layers, and I can try to show you that later as well. So if we're looking at, like I said, just kind of looking at the basic adjustments here, brightness, I typically like to drag it, and then you can see it'll adjust as you drag it. I can go down. You can also, if you wanted to type it in here, like let's say I wanted to go to 20 and see what that looks like, it'll automatically do that for you. If you want to go back to 0, you can always do back to 0. You can also undo. It won't give me the option here to undo right now, but if I was trying to put something in and I didn't like how that did and I wanted to go back to 0, I could just hit undo and it'll do that right away. Here's the contrast, the same thing. You can kind of drag it. You can kind of determine how much or how little you want. Same thing, I'll hit the undo here. And brightness and contrast, I would say you kind of have to be careful with, because the brightness could definitely flush out the photo. Like if I bring it all the way up here, definitely it's kind of hard to see you only get to see what's left of the darker parts here. Same thing with the contrast. The contrast kind of makes things look a little bit blurrier and or it can make it look too precise. So brightness and contrast, depending on what you're going for in the photo, you can kind of play around with those and decide what you want to see. Another one I use a lot is exposure. The exposure kind of highlights the brighter parts of the photo already that you have. So if I drag this and increase the exposure, it's going to white it out completely, see? So we don't want that. The offset kind of does the same thing, but it increases either the darker parts or the lighter parts. It kind of masks the whole photo, so you might not really want to do that too much. I typically like the gamma correction because that kind of almost acts as like a vibrance factor. So you can kind of play around with that and see what it does to the photo too. And if at any time you don't like any of these layers, you can delete them right here. And I'll ask you to delete the layer for exposure 1, and you can say yes, or you could say no, I'm going to delete it here because I don't really want it. Another adjustment that I really like is vibrance. I typically use this one a lot because I like to make my pictures pop a little bit when I'm editing. So you can see if I drag this one up, it gets more and more vibrant. This is really good to pair with saturation, so I like how Photoshop does this because saturation is how black and white the photo could be. So you could bring it all the way down and do completely black and white, or you can do completely the opposite. So saturation and vibrance kind of play off of each other really well. So you can do something that's really saturated and you have over accentuated color, or you can do vibrance as well and it kind of bring out that color more. Same thing here, if you bring it down, it brings out the color a little bit less. Actually, I kind of like that, so I think that's kind of cool to look at. How you can go from the original image, like I said, and the background is the original layer here. If I wanted to hide layers and kind of see the progress that I've made, you click this little eye icon here, and that automatically takes away those layers. So just again, if I wanted to see the background versus what I've edited on top of it with these other layers, I can hit this button, and then you can see it takes those layers off. Same thing, if I got rid of the background, I wouldn't have any layers because that's the base of it all. That's the whole base of your photo. And like I said, you have these other adjustments that are kind of basic for Photoshop editing. I'd say another one that's good to know is hue and saturation. This one is really a lot about playing around with different colors. So you see here, it'll kind of pick a different hue, a different color that will emphasize the photo. This is for more if you kind of want to do really funky kind of edits, like make things look a little bit distorted, or maybe if you're going for a certain monochromatic style, like that's really cool to use. Like see here, I kind of have this color scheme going on with these purples. Same thing with the saturation here. This will kind of determine how much or how little of that color will show. And I kind of like this too because you can see the purple is accentuated even more, but the white is kind of staying the same. So it picks up on where those colors are. Like there's a little bit here in this white, if you can see, and it kind of picks up on the more saturated colors here. Lightness too, that'll just determine how light or dark. I kind of want to leave that as is, so. And if you wanted to merge layers, you would just go up and select them all. You would hit your command key. I'm using a Mac, so you would use your command key. You would right click and then you'd scroll down and you would select merge visible so that all of the visible layers are put together onto one solid layer so you don't have them all listed separately. So like I said, it's also good to kind of take other photos from different angles. This one, like I said, I actually sat underneath the table and I took this kind of looking up. This photo is a little bit difficult because it doesn't have as much lighting. So when you go to your adjustments, I would say exposure is probably a good place to start to kind of help get that lighting in that already exists in the photo. Something else about the exposure is that it just kind of brings out the regular lighting that's already exists. It just kind of emphasizes it more. So like I see here, I just kind of drag this up a little bit just to make this a little bit brighter. Maybe the gamma correction will help me a little bit too in kind of making that look a little bit more vibrant. So that looks a little bit better. And something we might want I'll show you the posterize actually. Posterize is just kind of this really cool graphic image, and you can determine how much or how little you want as well. So if you bring it all the way up, there's nothing really going on, but if it's all the way down, it creates this really cool graphic effect. So if you wanted to play around with that, you could. Of course, you have different photo filters too. This one you can do like with an actual filter, so it'll be automatic. So maybe if I wanted a cooling filter, it'll automatically choose a color for it, or I can do it by the color itself, and the density is just how much or how little of that color. So the higher I bring it up, the more of this blue will show. The lower, the less of the blue. So the photo filter is always cool to have. I'm actually just gonna delete this layer because I didn't really feel like I used it too much. Posterize too. Yeah, so I'm kind of back to my original image here. Like I said, if you wanted to see the progress, you can just get rid of this layer by taking off the eye. And like I said, it's important to experiment as much as you can. I took these photos with a Nikon camera. I realize that not everyone has a Nikon camera at their disposal or any other professional camera, Canon, things like that. So if you do have something that you want to take a picture of and you just don't really have that kind of equipment, iPhone cameras are really good too. So this last photo I actually took with my iPhone. I have the iPhone XR. The newer iPhones have even better cameras. They're a lot sharper, they're a lot cleaner. The issue I kind of have with my camera is I have trouble kind of getting in close. So I wasn't really able to get too into this photo, but you still get a pretty decent image. Same thing if you wanted to play around with your adjustments over here. Like I said, the brightness is really good. The hue or saturation is really good. The color balance is really good too. I'll show you that a little bit. So this kind of shows you the different tones. You can do shadows, you can do highlights, you can do midtones. Midtones are, the name is kind of self-explanatory, it's in the middle. So you can choose what kind of color you want to be highlighted more. For something like this, because I already have kind of a magenta, I think the magenta would work. Same thing, the yellow, the blue. That just kind of gives you options to put in some more color if you want to. Like I said, a lot of time with Photoshop, you can do things more specifically, but these basic adjustments are a good starting point to kind of get you going with what you're looking for. If you want to emphasize a certain color, maybe you want to do the color balance, or you want to do the hue or saturation, or you want to do a channel mixer or color lookup or a filter or something like that. If you want to just play around with the brightness and contrast, that's always a good place to start. Like I mentioned, the different levels are just kind of the different color ranges and the different light ranges. That's a little bit difficult to get into, but if you look at it at the beginning, it'll kind of tell you where in your photo you have more light and more color. And the exposure as well, like I said, is always really good to start with too. And the vibrance is something I use pretty commonly too. Something else I want to mention too is that if you don't have access to a platform like Photoshop, or if you don't want to pay for a subscription, you can do some of the basic editing that I walked you through on your Photos application. If you have a MacBook, you just open up your photos and you import them from your phone. So this is another one of the photos that I imported from my phone. And what you would do for these basic edits is you would go up to the right corner here and you see this button that says edit, and that allows you to edit photos. So this brings you some basic adjustments like the light, the color, black and white. You also have some more specific ones here that also are similar to some of the functions in Photoshop. So if you want to do some of these basic edits, you could drag this little bar in the middle here, and that lets you adjust the light or the color. And see, some of these are kind of easy just for really simple edits that you want to make to photos. They do give you an auto option if you want to just let's do something a little bit simpler. You can undo if you don't like it too much. You can also revert back to your original photo if you don't like the edits that you made and you kind of want to start over. There's also this option here that is an automatic enhancer. and that'll kind of adjust your photo to how the system sees. So that's basically it. Thanks for watching and good luck.